Alright, so welcome to the Conversations Concerning Us YouTube channel. I'm Kenneth Marple, and today I'm going to be giving my thoughts on why I think Christianity is probably true. So, origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. These four categories have been brought up frequently by the late Ravi Zacharias, and he uses them to make a point, and here's a little clip to show you why.
And see where these four questions are dealt with: origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. These four questions have to be answered in two ways. Follow me, please. Every particular answer has to correspond to truth, either through empirical form of measurement or through the logical reasoning process. And when those four answers are put together, they must cohere.
The main point is any worldview system that seeks to try to answer the big questions of life, such as why are we here, must contend with these categories. So within this video, I'm not going to be dealing with people with an apathetic attitude or where they don't claim anything or they just don't care. I think these four major areas are a great place to start. Everyone wants to know when or where did it all begin? Is there a reason or purpose for my being here? How should we treat others, or ourselves and others, and what, if any, is the final place, or where does it all end? These are, generally speaking, what all worldviews seek to answer. I think this is also a reason why we see many people grabbing and pulling different concepts from different religions to design their own positions, much like a buffet. People find things in other worldviews that they find appealing, and they'll fill their plate with the things that they like. Now, this whole task may seem daunting and may even cause us to think the apathetic attitude, because really it is easier to simply dismiss these questions and to just kind of live as we see fit. But does this mean that is the right way to go about it? I'd like to think that most people would say that this is probably correct. We should investigate these worldviews to see which one is more likely correct, so we can direct our lives accordingly. Now, my arguments, my methods, my purpose is not to provide some kind of feel-good worldview because we as humans need something to believe in. Rather, my concern is finding what is true, or at least what can be reasonably assumed as true. I think stating that we know for a fact that something is true may be overstating something. This type of attitude seems fine when you're talking within your belief circle, but to be convincing, I think the best approach in any situation is to be a little bit more nuanced and thoughtful. I say this not to suggest that I doubt my worldview, but when dealing with other human beings that are kind of outside, like I said, that belief circle, they have wills and emotions, so the approach can be just as important as the content. So the basic idea behind my approach here is to see how Christianity provides the most rounded and most likely true position. There is no way that I can cover any of the material in depth, as I often say in many of the things that I do, because the areas are so broad and huge, and this video could be weeks or even months long. With most of these kinds of videos where we're dealing with a lot of material with an immense amount of depth, we must pick our battles and simply cover the material with broad brushstrokes. So let's jump right in. So how does Christianity answer the origin question, and how does that line up with what we know? Now, on a basic level, Christianity believes that God created all that we see at some finite point in the past. If I may point those watching this to the Kalam cosmological argument, and I'll post a link in the description below so you can watch it. Of course, there are many that find this argument invalid or unconvincing, but the argument itself is valid. It's just a matter of if you find it convincing or not, or if you disagree with one of the two major premises. But all this argument is saying is that stuff begins to exist and has a cause, which seems obvious. But then From that, we say that the universe began to exist. Again, there is strong scientific evidence to suggest that the universe came into being at some point in the past, i.e. the Big Bang. So we conclude that the universe has a cause. It's pretty simple. How do we explain this cause? Well, as stated above, Christianity says that God caused this since he stands outside of the physical universe. And we say that the physical cannot cause itself. There is some who argue through the use of the quantum realm that we see stuff pop in and out of existence, but I would point you to the literature to see these arguments. Far too much for me to cover here. The materialist claims that the universe came into being by chance, or it was necessary, or the universe has just always been here. Again, I'm not going to cover these objections, but I just want to take a big picture look. If we suggest chance, at least in my mind, this seems so unlikely. So chance doesn't seem to carry much explanatory power. The universe being necessary seems unlikely because that is to say that what we see could have been no other way. And so I would be sitting here making this video necessarily, and that's just how everything would have been. Saturn would be exactly where it is, and nothing could be any different. So what if we say the universe has always been here? This runs very contrary to what the scientific evidence suggests. I've heard people say that, well, there could have been some form of the universe existing prior to the Big Bang, and this seems very much like an ad hoc response. Since we cannot scientifically evaluate this claim, i.e. something existing prior to the universe as we see it, it seems philosophically flimsy. To claim this is really conjecture and does nothing to provide any grounding or explanatory power. Based on this, it seems like the Christian worldview stands above materialism as far as providing a stronger explanation. Again, and it kind of boils down to what you find convincing. But as far as explanatory power, I think a theistic worldview generally and a monotheistic worldview is going to provide a much stronger explanation. Maybe not convincingly for many. But what about the other theistic worldviews? Well, monotheistic worldviews, Islam, deism, Judaism, seems to be comparable to Christianity. The Eastern religions seem to falter since many of them suggest an impersonal force is what guides things. But how can something that has no will or intent guide anything? So those views that have many gods, it seems unlikely that the attitudes and dispositions of these gods, the multiple, would make for a conducive explanation for how we have what we see. I find it unlikely that all of these gods would have worked together or allowed some of them to work together, since many of them are in conflict with one another and have different intentions for the universe. Because these systems where you have multiple gods, you have malevolent and benevolent and even apathetic gods. Many of these gods are warring against each other. So it just doesn't seem probable, or doesn't seem to make a lot of sense on how everything would have came about, and how everything kind of seems to fit together and we live in an orderly universe. So what about meaning? Well, under a materialistic worldview, meaning seems to be a very odd concept. Since everything exists by chance, it's hard to find any substantive answer to a question of meaning. Of course, you could make your own meaning, but this is not a unified picture of meaning, nor is it an encompassing view of what meaning is. Eastern religions seem to suggest that our goal is to shed our lives of desires or physical connections so we can reach a higher state of being. But in many cases, this higher state of being is simply being absorbed by the impersonal force, which would mean that you as an individual would be unaware of this transformation, since you would in turn become an impersonal force, and an impersonal force doesn't feel nor is it aware of anything. There could be some distinctions made between the monotheistic religions here. Islam, on a basic level, desires to please Allah. So your whole life is spent doing things so as not to upset or displease Allah. Judaism is similar in the sense that the goal is to live according to God's laws and please Him by living a holy life. Meaning in the Christian worldview is found in Christ. There's no works that can be done that affect our stance with God, but our goal is to share the valuable relationship we have with Christ with the world. Essentially, the Christian's meaning is bound up in being made holy through Christ, trying to help others become holy through Christ, and to have a relationship with the Creator. Again, all of this is being stated very basically. So Christianity seems to stand out here by having a more rounded view, and it is not focused on the self. This is a big deal, is it's not focused inward, it's focused outward. I believe the explanatory power here stands above the others, and we are talking about actual Christianity, not some weakened caricature of it. So what about morality? Now, the morality issue is a heavily contested, area of debate, especially with people like Sam Harris writing an entire book on the topic called The Moral Landscape. But what best explains what seems really evident? Like, humans seem to have an innate sense of right and wrong. Persons seem to have value as opposed to abstract objects or non-living concrete objects or even other living creatures. Eastern religions seem to suggest that morality is based on the consequences of our actions and focuses heavily on virtues and vices. I personally do not know how they ground it. So what is the ontological basis for this morality? Now, the morality cannot be based in a universal sense on an impersonal force, since something that is impersonal cannot suggest anything. It doesn't have a will or intentionality. If it is based on previous teachings, then it is based on the thoughts of other humans and thus does nothing to give an ontological basis, something that is grounded outside of people. The main reason for this is, as humans, we're all on the same ontological level. We're all on the same being or basic level. So there's not one human on a fundamental level that is above another human person. Materialism seems to base morality on the structure of evolution, i.e. the moral landscape. But this fails to provide a substantial explanation, since if humans were not on the top of this evolutionary chain, then we would not be what is valuable. For instance, if bees had evolved in such a way that they were the top species, then they would be the thing that possessed ultimate value. So morality under this view is very subjective in the sense that it seems to be very preferential or based on group. It does not possess the ability to provide a universal grounding for right and wrong. The monotheistic religions have an advantage here, because morality can be based simply on this single supreme being that stands outside and above humans on an ontological level. So how do we differentiate between which one is more likely true? The goal is to find inconsistencies or contradictory things within the moral system. In many moral systems, and this kind of spans whether from monotheistic, pantheistic, or even atheist, we all kind of have similar moral concepts. The most common one that everybody knows is the golden rule. So Christianity seems to stand above Islam because the Christian God has not changed and does not have the same sort of capricious attitude as Allah. Again, I do not have time to go into depth, but I would point you to the direction of people like David Wood, who handle Islam in depth. And he talks about Allah, and he talks about Muhammad and all of these different things. So you can check him out, and I will post a link in the description so you can investigate that a little bit further. So what about destiny? All destiny means is what the future events or event will hold, or what they'll be. What kind of future do we have if atheism is true? Again, my position is not let's pick the happiest or most hopeful future. Rather, what view best holds to the things that we know? This question does in a way pull on the emotional strings, because much of what we know from this area is based on the different types of information. So we can know certain things about the future status of the physical universe based on the inference and observation. So science can tell us what is more than likely going to happen in the future. We can learn about things from the different worldviews as far as what they believe will happen to human beings themselves in the future. Just know my goal here is not to cause people to feel a certain way towards any particular view, but rather see how each view sees the future events regarding us as human beings. Anyhow, if atheism were true, the future of human beings is quite simple. We cease to exist. We know this because at some point in the future, the universe will run out of usable energy and will be an uninhabitable place for life. Since atheism does not believe in some existence after our physical existence, then once things within the universe have ceased to exist or become a place not livable for humans and other creatures, it can be assumed at that point nothing but dead stars and planets will inhabit the universe. It's pretty bleak. What about Eastern religions? Most of these religions hold that the goal is to shed this physical existence anyway, so that we can be absorbed into this ever-present God or being of the universe. And some even view, in the atheistic view, that some even view in the atheistic view, but we will just be part of the universe. So some atheists will just believe that we're going to return to stardust. That's fine. So in some way, we will still exist, but we won't be a we or a me anymore. We will simply exist as part of the universe, stardust, from the atheist view, or we'll be the force, if you will, to keep it on something many will understand, but we won't have a consciousness or an identity. Basically, there will be no we or me, as I said. It's pretty much similar to non-existence. So the monotheistic religions provide something a little bit different. Islam believes that all of the faithful will be with Allah, and this is based on the specific things that they do or how faithful they were in the physical life. That'll change how their future existence will be. What I don't know is if Muslims after death can leave this heavenly state. Now, Jews believe there will be a future bodily resurrection and all the world will be judged. The faithful will be with God and the unfaithful will either be destroyed or go to hell. The distinction here really depends on the particular Jew you're talking to. Christians believe also in the future resurrection, and the faithful will be judged and live with Christ in the new heavens and the new earth. Actually, the whole world will be judged, but the faithful, or those who have accepted Christ, will live in his kingdom where Christ reigns. Of course, I'm not going in depth with any of this, not in depth in Christian eschatology, or the other views for that matter. Like I said, I'm just trying to paint a broad brushstroke idea here of how these different religions will answer these questions. So the Eastern religions seem to not fit well. How can an impersonal force control or guide anything for the future state of things? Or if this impersonal force is not guiding these things, what is? It seems that if we are going to be transitioning states of being, there would be some sort of need for a controlling force that has some intentionality or at least a will, which would take an impersonal thing and make it a personal thing. Atheism seems perfectly plausible in that if it were true, and only if the physical exists, then the point at which the physical is no longer habitable for life would cease. But there are things that make the view that only the physical exists seem unlikely. There are studies on near-death experiences that would suggest that there is something beyond the physical. I won't deal with that here, but it's worth saying that because of these factors and obviously how we determine we don't understand the mind or consciousness, there's many things that aren't physical in nature, or at least don't seem to be physical in nature, that would make us question whether the physical is all there is. So the Christian view seems to be the most coherent and thus most likely, based on the views that it holds. And it kind of does depend on the Christian that you're talking to, because there are some churches where their beliefs can kind of get a little cattywampus. But if it is true that Christ raised from the dead, then it seems that the things that he taught are probably true. Because somebody raising from the dead is something we've never seen, and that would almost be like a validation that God approves of the things that he taught and said and did. There are coherence issues with Islam, and I will again refer anyone curious about the specifics to David Wood's YouTube channel, link below. The Jewish faith seems to have most of the information correct, since they based much of their views on the Old Testament and some of the extra biblical writings from their rabbis and such. But the big difference maker is Christ. Again, even Paul talks about it in 1 Corinthians 15. If Christ did not raise from the dead, then we Christians are to be pitied. But if he did, that changes everything. So it seems that if we are going to determine if Christianity is probably true, we need to be looking at Christ. If Christ raised from the dead, there seems to be the little question about what is true or not. Though you may not be convinced of this, it should cause you, if nothing more than curiosity, to check into it with as little bias as possible, so that you can know if it's at least possible. So with that, if you liked what you saw or didn't like it, comment below and hit the like button and the subscribe button for future content. By all means, if you want to continue this discussion, do so in the comments section below, and we can have a dialogue back and forth. If I need to put out a better video, I can do so with more in-depth information. Obviously, this one has kind of turned out to be a little bit long, but what I can do is take each section and do a video on each section, or a series of videos, so I can touch these things more in depth and maybe be a little bit more charitable with the other views, so we can really dive and get some of the questions answered. But I really appreciate you watching. Hope you have a great day.